When my daughter threw my gift in the trash, something inside me broke. It wasn't the kind of break that shatters loudly. It was quieter, the kind that seeps into your bones and makes every breath heavier than the last. Her name is Alana, and for as long as I can remember, she was my sun. She lit up rooms, pulled laughter out of strangers, and made even the grayest mornings look golden. I used to joke that she was born with a spotlight following her. I, on the other hand, had always lived in the background. A mother who cooked, cleaned, and clapped from the sidelines. That was enough for me. It really was. Until that night. It was her 21st birthday. I'd been saving for months, hiding small bills inside an old sugar tin behind the flour. Every shift at the diner, I'd drop a few more crumpled notes in there. Not because she asked for anything, but because I wanted to give her something meaningful, something that said, "You're still my little girl, even as you chase the world." I decided to make her a scrapbook. Not the kind you buy at stores with printed glitter quotes, but one made by hand. I gathered photos, ticket stubs, tiny notes I'd saved since her childhood. Every page told a story. The first time she rode a bike, her first recital, the note she wrote me in crayon. "Mommy, you smell like pancakes and love." I worked on it every night after my shifts, with aching feet and tired eyes, but a heart full of warmth. I imagined her smiling when she opened it, maybe tearing up, maybe saying, "Oh, Mom, this is perfect." When the night came, I dressed nicely, not fancy, but enough that she'd know I cared. The house was lit with fairy lights, her favorite chocolate cake cooling on the counter. She arrived with friends, loud, glittering young, the kind of youth that doesn't know how quickly it fades. "Mom," she exclaimed, kissing my cheek lightly. "You did all this?" "Of course," I smiled. "My baby only turns 21 once." Her friends laughed politely, though one of them whispered something under her breath that made Alana giggle. I pretended not to notice. We ate cake, sang, and she opened gifts. Expensive perfumes, a gold bracelet, a designer bag. Then came mine. It was wrapped simply, brown paper, tied with a satin ribbon I'd ironed flat. "What's this?" she asked, smiling half-heartedly. "Something special," I said. "Open it." She tore the paper and flipped through the first few pages. For a moment, silence. Then she laughed. That sharp, nervous laugh people use when they're embarrassed. "Oh, Mom, this is cute." "Cute," I echoed softly. Her friends leaned in. One whispered, "That's kinda old school, right?" Alana shrugged. "Yeah, it's just sentimental." And before I could say another word, she closed it, stood up, and tossed it toward the trash bin by the counter. It landed with a dull thud, pages bending, ribbon unraveling. My heart froze. The room spun. Alana. "Oh, Mom, don't look at me like that," she said, rolling her eyes. "You know I don't do this mushy stuff. I'm not 12. Her friends laughed again. Someone turned the music up. The moment passed for them, but not for me. I smiled, because mothers are trained to smile even while breaking. After they left, I sat in the quiet, the cake half-eaten, the fairy lights still glowing like false hope. I picked up the scrapbook. One page had torn at the corner, a photo half peeled away. It was the one of us at the beach, her tiny hand gripping my fingers, sand in her curls, both of us laughing into the wind. I touched the picture, feeling the sting behind my eyes. Somehow, the woman who used to look at me like I hung the moon now looked at me like a relic from another life. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that flash of indifference in hers, the moment she decided her mother no longer mattered. Morning came gray and still. I made coffee but didn't drink it. I cleaned the counters twice, then wandered into her room, untouched since she moved out. The walls were still covered in posters, the bed neatly made. Her trophies lined the shelf like quiet ghosts of the girl I used to know. On the desk sat a stack of letters I'd written her when she was in college, none opened. My handwriting felt like a stranger's. Something changed in me that morning. Not anger, not even sadness. Just an ache that demanded movement. So I sat down at the small table by the window, opened my old laptop, and started to type. I didn't plan it. It just happened like a dam breaking. The first line came like a whisper. A mother's hands remember, even when her child forgets. I stared at it for a long time. Then I began to write everything I'd never said aloud. The loneliness, the pride, the small daily sacrifices that had gone unseen. The words poured out faster than my tears. Days passed. I went to work, smiled at customers, washed dishes, and came home to write. The pages grew, one by one, until my table was covered in printed sheets. Writing became my prayer, each word a confession, each page a piece of my heart. Weeks later, I printed the collection and titled it Letters to My Daughter. I didn't know why. Maybe because that's what they were, letters I'd been writing in my heart for years. I never planned to show anyone. But life has a way of nudging you forward when you think you've reached your end. One rainy afternoon, I ducked into a tiny bookstore downtown. The bell chimed softly as I entered. The air smelled of paper and dust, like time itself. At the counter, a young woman smiled. Looking for something special? Just shelter, I said with a tired laugh. She pointed to a corkboard near the door. We're running a local story contest, themes letters that changed my life. You should enter. I almost said no, but something inside me, maybe the part that still believed in miracles, made me take one of the flyers. That night, I printed one of my stories, slipped it in an envelope, and mailed it. Then I forgot about it. 3 weeks later, the phone rang. Hello, is this Margaret Hill? Yes. This is Elena from Morning Light Publishing. We received your story Letters to My Daughter. It moved me to tears. Would you consider meeting us? For a moment, I couldn't speak. The room blurred around me. When I hung up, I sat there staring at my hands. The same hands that scrubbed floors, cooked meals, wiped tears, now holding possibility. That meeting changed everything. They asked me to expand the story into a full book. I hesitated. I was no writer, just a mother with too many feelings. But Elena looked me straight in the eye and said, sometimes the best stories come from those who've lived them. So I said yes. The following months were a blur of coffee, late nights, and memories. I wrote until my fingers cramped, chasing ghosts across the keyboard. Each chapter was a confession. The joys, the regrets, the dreams I'd buried under duty. And with every word, I felt myself coming back to life. When the first printed copy arrived, I held it like a newborn. The cover showed 2 hands holding a torn photograph, mother and daughter. I cried until my chest ached. I didn't tell Alana. We still talked, but our conversations were shallow, weather, work, the occasional holiday. She was always busy, always on the move. I didn't blame her. The world teaches young people to run fast. It never tells them who's left standing behind. Then one morning an email arrived. It was from the same bookstore. They were hosting a Mother's Day event called The Power of a Mother's Words, and they wanted me to read a passage from my book. My heart pounded. I almost declined. Public speaking terrified me. But something whispered, go. So I went. That day the hall was filled with women, some young, some gray-haired, all carrying stories behind their eyes. When I walked up to the podium, my hands trembled. I read the passage where I wrote about watching my daughter sleep when she was 5, whispering prayers into her curls. By the time I looked up, half the audience was in tears. Afterward, strangers hugged me. A woman said, your story healed something in me. Another whispered, I wish my mother had written me letters. I drove home feeling both lighter and heavier. Lighter because I'd shared my heart, heavier because I wished Alana had been there. When I got home, my phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. Mom, are you free tonight? I saw something I need to talk to you about. My hands shook. It was her. That was the night everything changed again. The message appeared on my screen as the evening light faded through the kitchen window. For a moment, I thought I was imagining it. I read it twice, maybe 3 times. Mom, are you free tonight? My first instinct was joy, that tiny spark that flickers inside every mother when her child reaches out first. but it was followed quickly by the familiar ache of uncertainty. What had she seen? Why now? I typed and erased my reply 3 times before sending. Of course, sweetheart. I'll be home. I cleaned the house the way people do when they're nervous, wiping surfaces already spotless, lighting a candle whose scent I barely noticed. The clock seemed to move slower than it had in years. At exactly 8, headlights swept across the window. My heart stuttered. When the door opened, there she was, Alana. No glitter this time, no crowd, no music. Just my daughter, standing in the doorway with a cautious smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Hey, Mom," she said softly. "Hi, baby." The words slipped out of habit. She looked around, almost shy. "You haven't changed much in here." "I like the quiet," I replied, and motioned toward the sofa. "Sit." "You hungry?" She shook her head. "No, thanks." For a long moment, silence stretched between us, filled only by the ticking of the wall clock. She clasped her hands together, fidgeting with a silver ring. Then she pulled a book from her bag. My breath caught. It was letters to my daughter. "My book." "I didn't know you wrote this," she said. Her voice trembled slightly. I saw it at a friend's apartment. She said it changed the way she talks to her mom. Then I noticed the author's name, and she paused, searching my face. I couldn't believe it was you. I swallowed hard, trying to keep my tone steady. "I didn't think you'd be interested." Her eyes darted down to the cover. "I read the whole thing in one night." I didn't know what to say. My hands found each other in my lap, twisting nervously. "Mom," she whispered, "those stories, were they all about us?" I nodded slowly. Every word. Her voice cracked. "I didn't know you felt that way. That night." I looked away, to the small framed photo on the wall of her first day of kindergarten. "You were growing up. I thought you didn't need to hear it anymore." She took a shaky breath. "I was stupid, wasn't I?" "No," I said quietly. "You were just young. The world tells daughters they have to run to be strong. It forgets to tell them strength can live quietly too, in home-cooked meals, in someone waiting up late." Tears filled her eyes. "I'm so sorry, Mom." I wanted to reach for her, but stayed still, afraid to break the fragile honesty hanging in the air. She wiped her face and gave a small, trembling laugh. "I threw away something that meant everything to you." I finally looked at her, really looked, and I almost let it mean the end of everything to me. But writing saved me. It reminded me that love doesn't stop just because it isn't seen. She covered her mouth with her hands, shoulders shaking. Then she whispered, "I don't deserve you." That broke me. I stood, crossed the room, and pulled her into my arms. For the first time in years, she didn't pull away. "You don't have to deserve love," I murmured into her hair. "You just have to come back to it." We stayed like that a long time. No apologies big enough, no explanations left. Just 2 hearts finding their rhythm again. When she finally spoke, her voice was muffled against my shoulder. "Mom, will you tell me how you started writing? I want to know everything." So I did. I told her about the long nights, the blank screens, the memories that came alive under my fingers. She listened without interrupting, nodding slowly, her hand never leaving mine. Later, she asked, "Can I see the scrapbook? The one I threw away?" I hesitated. "It's still here." I went to the cabinet and took it out. The edges were frayed, the ribbon faded, but it was intact. A survivor, like me. She opened it carefully, page by page. Her fingers traced the photos, the notes, the ticket stubs. Each turn seemed to pull another sob from her chest. "Oh God," she whispered, "you kept everything." "I told you." I smiled gently. Mothers remember. She closed the book and held it to her chest. "Can I keep it?" "For now," I said. "But only if you promise to fill the rest of the pages yourself." She blinked, confused. "What do you mean?" I handed her a pen. "Start writing. Letters to your future. To me. To whoever you become. Don't let the story stop here." She took the pen with trembling fingers. "Okay," she whispered. Outside, rain began to fall, soft, cleansing, endless. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel empty. I felt whole. After that night, the house felt different. Not louder, not busier, but alive again. There were 2 mugs on the kitchen table in the morning instead of 1. The sound of Alana's laughter, timid at first, like a song she'd forgotten the lyrics to, began to echo through the rooms that had once only known silence. She stayed longer than I expected, said she wanted to clear her head, but I could tell she was searching for something she'd lost, something she didn't even know how to name. Sometimes, I'd find her sitting in the garden where I used to write, eyes closed, breathing in the calm. Other times, she'd linger in my study, reading my drafts as if they were puzzle pieces to a map she was trying to follow. One morning, I found her asleep on the couch with my scrapbook open on her lap. The pen I'd given her was still in her hand, its tip resting against a fresh page where she'd written, "Dear Mom, I used to think love was about being seen. Now I think it's about seeing." I didn't wake her. I just stood there, tears welling, letting the quiet miracle of it all sink in. Days passed, and the world outside my window began to shift too. My book, Letters to My Daughter, was quietly spreading. More emails came in, mothers writing to thank me for giving words to their pain, daughters confessing they finally understood the women who raised them. A magazine called, then a small podcast, then a television producer. It wasn't fame I wanted, it was connection. And suddenly, it was everywhere. One afternoon, as I sat at my desk editing a new chapter, Alana walked in, holding her phone. "Mom, can I show you something?" On the screen was a video, a young woman crying softly as she read an excerpt from my book aloud. The caption said, "For every mom I never thanked." It had 1 million views. "She tagged you," Alana said quietly. I blinked. She did. Alana nodded. "People are talking about you, Mom. Your words, they're healing people." Something inside me trembled, not pride, but awe. I'd written from a wound, and somehow it had become medicine. Alana set the phone down and sat beside me. "I want to help you," she said. I smiled. "Help me how?" "Your story. Your readers. Maybe we could do this together?" Her voice was careful, tentative, the way a child asks if it's okay to come home. I studied her face, seeing shades of the girl who used to draw rainbows on the kitchen wall and the woman who once called me pathetic. I reached for her hand. Together sounds perfect. And so it began. She helped me design a small website. Then she set up an account where readers could share their own letters. Every night, we'd sit side by side, reading stories from around the world. A mother in Kenya writing to her estranged son, a teenager in Ohio forgiving her mom for missing her graduation. Each story felt like a thread, weaving us closer. One evening, as we read a message from a single mother in Brazil, Alana said softly, "You know, Mom, people think I'm confident. But I've been scared all this time. Scared of being like you." I turned to her, startled. "Like me?" She nodded. Strong but lonely. I thought if I stayed busy, if I shined bright enough, I'd never feel that kind of emptiness. But I do. I did. Her confession hit me like a wave. "Oh, sweetheart." She shook her head. "You weren't pathetic, Mom. You were brave. I just didn't understand what that looked like yet." I reached out, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. "We both had to grow up again, didn't we?" She smiled, eyes glistening. "Maybe we still are." That night, when I went to bed, I couldn't sleep. I stood by the window watching the streetlights shimmer against the rain-soaked road. My heart felt full, not of regret anymore, but of something deeper, peace. The next morning, my phone buzzed with an unfamiliar number. It was a TV host inviting me to share my story on a national morning show. My first instinct was to refuse, but Alana, who overheard, jumped up. "Mom, you have to do it." "I'm not sure," I said. "It's too big." "Mom," she said, taking my hands, "you spent years making yourself small for people who didn't see you. Maybe it's time the world finally does." Her words left me still. That afternoon, I said yes. When the day came, Alana went with me. She helped me pick my outfit, a simple navy dress, soft pearl earrings. She even did my makeup, laughing softly when I blinked too much. "You look beautiful, Mom," she whispered before we left. At the studio, lights flashed, cameras blinked, and producers rushed around like clockwork. My heart pounded, but Alana squeezed my hand. "You've got this," she said. The host introduced me with warmth, her voice filling the studio. "Tonight, we have the woman behind the viral sensation letters to my daughter, a story that's changed how millions see motherhood." I took a deep breath and began to speak. I talked about love that endures, about pain that teaches, about how sometimes the hardest goodbyes lead us home again. When the segment ended, the audience was quiet. Then someone stood and clapped. Then another. Then all of them. I turned to Alana in the front row. She was crying. After the show, she threw her arms around me and whispered, "I've never been prouder to be your daughter." After the interview aired, everything changed, but not in the way I expected. For days, my inbox flooded with messages from strangers who said my words made them call their mothers, write letters, or forgive someone they hadn't spoken to in years. I sat at my desk reading one after another, tears blurring the screen. But among all those voices, one stood out, a message from a woman who simply wrote, "Your story made me realize I still have time to say sorry. Thank you." It wasn't signed. No name. No details. Just that one sentence. When I read it, my chest ached. It felt like the echo of 100 unspoken apologies, mine, Alana's, and all the others hidden between mothers and daughters across the world. Alana was the one who noticed how quiet I'd become. She peeked into my study that evening, holding a bowl of soup. "You've been in here all day. You okay?" I smiled faintly. "I'm just processing." She set the bowl down beside me and pulled up a chair. "It's overwhelming, huh?" "Yes," I whispered. "But beautiful too." We sat in silence for a while. Then softly she said, "Mom, I was thinking maybe we could start something. Like an online space for moms and daughters. A place for letters, forgiveness, stories." I looked up at her. "A space for healing?" She nodded. "Exactly. You started something, Mom. Let's keep it going." Her eyes had that light again, the spark I hadn't seen since she was little. The same one she used to have when she dreamed about changing the world. We called it the Letter Project. And just like that, our small kitchen became a command center. We spent hours reading letters from around the world, recording short clips, writing responses together. There were nights we laughed until our sides hurt, and others when we cried quietly over stories of loss and reconciliation. It was strange. The daughter, who once couldn't stand my voice, was now listening to it every day. One night, as we sat on the couch with our laptops open, Alana turned to me and said, "You know what's funny? For years, I thought you were living in the past. But now I see, you were just holding on to love the only way you knew how." I didn't answer right away. My throat tightened. "And I thought you'd outgrown me," I finally said. "But maybe I just needed to make space for the woman you became." She smiled softly. Guess we both had growing to do. Outside, rain pattered gently against the windows. I remember thinking how even the softest sound could feel like forgiveness. That night, before going to bed, I went through the old box where I kept the letter she once threw away, or, at least, the remains of it. I'd taped the torn pieces back together long ago. The paper was wrinkled, the ink faded, but the words still lived. "No matter how far you go, my love follows. Not to hold you back, but to remind you that you'll always have a home." I tucked the letter into a new envelope and sealed it again. For the first time, I didn't cry when I looked at it. I smiled. Weeks passed. Our project gained attention. A few local schools invited us to speak. The more I watched Alana, the more I realized this wasn't about me anymore. She was finding her voice, her purpose. At one event, a young girl raised her hand and asked Alana, "How did you fix things with your mom?" Alana smiled, looked at me, then said, "I didn't fix her. I finally saw her." The room went quiet. Even I couldn't breathe for a second. Later that night, in the car, I said, "That was beautiful, Alana." She shrugged shyly. "It's true, though. For so long, I looked at you like a character in my story. But you were the whole author. I laughed softly. We co-wrote this one. We drove home in silence, the city lights dancing across the windshield. I thought about how strange life was, how love could bend, break, and still find its way back in the dark. A few days later, I woke to find Alana sitting in the kitchen, staring at her phone. Her eyes were red. "What's wrong?" I asked. She looked up slowly, voice trembling. "Mom, it's Grandma." My heart stopped. "Your grandmother?" She nodded. "She's not doing well. The nursing home called this morning." A rush of memories hit me. My mother's stern face, our unresolved arguments, the silence that had lasted years. I hadn't spoken to her since the day she told me I'd failed as a wife. Without thinking, I said, "We're going." The drive was long and heavy. Neither of us spoke much, but Alana held my hand the whole way. When we arrived, the nurse led us to a small room. My mother looked fragile, almost translucent. Her eyes fluttered open when she heard my voice. "Mom, it's me." Her lips trembled. "Margaret." I nodded. "Yes, I'm here." For a moment, I didn't know what to say. All the years of distance, all the sharp words, suddenly felt so small. She whispered, "I saw you on TV." I blinked. "You did." Her frail hand reached for mine. "You always had a voice. I just didn't know how to listen." Tears rolled down my cheeks. I didn't know how to speak without fear. She smiled weakly. "Now you do." We stayed for hours, just talking. When it was time to leave, she looked at Alana and said, "Be kind to her. She's braver than she looks." Alana nodded, holding my mother's hand gently. "I know. I learned from the best." Driving home that night, I couldn't stop crying. Not from sadness, but from something purer. The sense that every woman in our family had finally exhaled after years of holding her breath. Alana reached over and turned on the radio. A soft song played, one my mother used to hum when I was a child. Alana squeezed my hand. "You okay?" I nodded. "I think I finally am." When we got home, she hugged me tightly. "Mom, can I tell you something?" "Always." When I threw that letter away, your gift, I wasn't angry at you. I was angry at myself. I thought if I pushed you away, it'd prove I didn't need you. But all I did was lose myself. I held her face in my hands. "We both made mistakes, darling. But love has a way of surviving what pride tries to bury." She began to cry, not quietly, but with the raw honesty of a child coming home. I pulled her into my arms, her tears soaking my shoulder, and whispered, "You're home now, baby. That's all that matters." We stayed like that for a long time. The rain started again outside, tapping against the windows like a gentle applause from the universe. In that moment, I realized forgiveness doesn't erase the past, it redeems it. And maybe, just maybe, that was the greatest gift of all. A week passed after our visit to my mother. The house was calm again. No rush of calls, no deadlines, no cameras. Just the hum of life returning to its simplest rhythm. Tea on the table, the smell of rain-soaked earth through the open window, the soft tick of the clock that had belonged to my grandmother. Alana had been quiet these past few days. She worked from her room mostly, sometimes stepping out to hug me for no reason, sometimes lost in thought. I didn't ask what was on her mind. I'd learned that silence, too, could be sacred, a place where love gathers its strength. One morning, I woke to the faint sound of the piano. It was the same melody I used to hum when she was little, a tune she had once told me she hated because it made her feel small. Now, she was playing it softly, tenderly, like an apology without words. I stood in the hallway, listening. When she finished, she looked up and saw me. "Couldn't sleep?" she asked. I shook my head, smiling. "Not when there's music in the house again." She patted the bench beside her. "Come sit." I sat, and for a moment, we just stared at the keys, black and white, side by side, like all the opposites that somehow made our lives whole. Then she said, "I've been writing something." My heart skipped. "A song." She shook her head. "A letter." She reached for an envelope lying on the piano, the same kind of soft cream paper I used to write on. My name was written across it in her familiar, looping script. "Can I asked. She nodded. I opened it carefully. Inside were 3 pages, filled edge to edge with her handwriting, hurried in some places, trembling in others. "Mom, I used to think your love was heavy, something that pressed against me until I couldn't breathe. I see now that it wasn't the weight of your love I was fighting. It was the weight of my own pride. When you gave me that letter years ago, I wasn't ready to receive it. I was angry at the world, and you were the easiest part of it to blame. I threw it away because I thought rejecting you would make me stronger. I didn't realize it was the same as throwing away my own reflection. I saw the way you kept going, the way you rebuilt yourself quietly, without bitterness. I used to roll my eyes at your softness, but it turns out softness is a kind of power. You showed me that forgiveness isn't weakness, it's courage wearing gentleness as armor. The night I saw you on TV, I cried. Not because you were finally seen, but because I finally saw you, truly, for the first time. You looked radiant, not because of makeup or lights, but because you had found peace with or without me. And I wanted that peace too. So here I am, asking if you can make room for me again, not as a little girl who needs fixing, but as a woman who finally understands where she came from. I'm sorry, Mom, for the words I said, for the ones I didn't, for the years I made you question if you mattered. You did. You do. You always will. Your daughter, Alana. By the time I reached the end, the words blurred. My tears fell onto the paper, tiny circles spreading like ripples in a still pond. I looked at her, and she looked at me. No more hiding, no more pride. Just 2 women who had finally found their way back to each other. Without a word, I leaned forward and pulled her into my arms. She clung to me, shaking. I could feel the heartbeat that once lived beneath my own, now pressing against me again after so many years apart. I forgive you, I whispered into her hair. A long time ago, I already did. She sobbed harder, her hands clutching my shoulders. I don't deserve you. Of course you do, I said softly. You're my daughter. You were never supposed to be perfect, just real. We stayed like that for what felt like forever. The clock ticked, the wind brushed through the curtains, the world outside moved on, but inside, time stopped. When she finally pulled back, her face was red and shining. Mom, can I show you something? She took her phone and opened a video. It was her, speaking into the camera, eyes swollen but voice steady. This is for every mother I ever judged before I became brave enough to understand mine. She explained the letter project in her own words, inviting people not to wait until it's too late to say I'm sorry or I love you. I was going to post it today, she said quietly. But only if you're okay with it. I smiled. I think the world could use more honesty like that. She nodded, wiped her tears, and hit post. That evening, we made tea and watched the sun set behind the magnolia trees. The air smelled of rain and lavender. Alana leaned her head on my shoulder, just like she used to when she was little. Mom, she said softly. Yes, sweetheart. Do you ever wish things had been different? I thought for a moment. Sometimes. But if they had been, we might never have learned how deep love can really go. She was quiet for a while, then said, Thank you for waiting for me to come home. I never stopped setting a place for you, I whispered. The sky darkened, and the first stars began to appear, faint but steady. Later that night, when she went to bed, I sat alone at my desk. The old torn letter, the one she'd thrown away, still lay in the drawer beside me. I took it out one last time, traced the faded lines, then folded it neatly and slipped it into the same box where I now placed her letter to. Mother and daughter. 2 apologies. 2 hearts that finally spoke the same language. I sealed the box, tied it with a thin ribbon, and whispered to the quiet room, We're okay now. And in that silence, I felt something shift, a gentle loosening of everything I'd carried for years. The pain didn't vanish, but it softened, like a scar finally turning into memory. Somewhere down the hall, I heard Alana laugh in her sleep, a light, unguarded laugh I hadn't heard in decades. I smiled. Because that was the sound of forgiveness. Because that was the sound of home. The evening light stretched across my kitchen table, spilling gold over the wooden surface where a single envelope lay waiting. It was Alana's handwriting, a little shaky, just like mine gets when my heart's too full. I had almost convinced myself I didn't need this letter, that I had already forgiven her the moment I saw her crying in the rain weeks ago. But forgiveness, it's funny. It's never a single moment. It's 1,000 quiet choices you keep making, day after day, even when your heart still hurts. I sat down, slipped on my reading glasses, and opened the envelope. "Mom," it began. The first word alone made my breath catch. It wasn't mother, not Evelyn. Just mom. A word that once filled my house with warmth before silence took over. "I don't know how to start this," she wrote. "Everything I say feels too small for the weight of what I've done. I think about that night all the time, the one when you brought me the necklace. I remember the way your hands shook when you gave it to me, and how I rolled my eyes like a spoiled child. I thought I was being honest about what I wanted, but really, I was just cruel." My throat tightened. I pressed the page against my chest, as if holding it could somehow turn back time. "I threw your gift away because I didn't want to see you or me as ordinary. But that necklace wasn't ordinary, was it? It was you. Every bead, every little imperfection, every thread of patience and love you stitched into it." The words blurred for a second as tears filled my eyes. I remembered how long I'd spent making that necklace, tiny golden beads, little glass charms. My fingers ached for days afterward, but I didn't care. It was meant to tell her one thing. "You still matter to me, no matter how far you go." "When you walked away that night, I thought I'd won," she continued. "I told myself you were being dramatic, that you'd never change. But the truth is, Mom, you did. You changed into someone I didn't recognize, calm, proud, beautiful. You were glowing in a way that made me feel like the small one. I hated it. I hated that you found happiness without me." I smiled through the tears. The same kind of smile you give when your heart hurts but feels grateful at the same time. Because she finally saw it. She saw me not as her shadow, but as her mother, a woman who had her own light, too. The next lines were shaky, written in darker ink, like her hand had pressed too hard. "I want to tell you what happened after your art show. I walked home that night and looked at myself in the mirror. For the first time, I didn't like what I saw. Not because of how I looked, but because I couldn't see any kindness left in me. I cried for hours, Mom. I thought about every phone call I ignored, every dinner I missed, every time I made you feel like you were in my way. I could almost see her there, sitting on her apartment floor, surrounded by silence, the same kind of silence I'd lived in for years. I wanted to call you 1,000 times, but shame kept hanging up the phone. I wiped my cheeks and turned the page. When you started that community center, I went there one evening. You didn't see me. I stood in the back while you helped those kids paint. You laughed, Mom. You really laughed. It was like watching sunlight pour into a room that had been dark for too long. And I realized I'd been trying to live without that light. You taught them how to make something beautiful from broken pieces. I wanted to ask if you could teach me the same thing. By now, my tears had soaked through the paper, but I didn't stop reading. I know I can't take back what I said, calling you pathetic, throwing your gift away. But if you still have any space in your heart for me, I'd like to come home. Not to stay forever, just to sit with you. Maybe we can drink tea, or maybe we can just sit in silence. I think I'd be okay with that now. I set the letter down and stared out the window. The sun had slipped behind the trees, leaving the world painted in shades of rose and gray. The same colors as the necklace I'd made her, the one she had once thrown away. Except it wasn't lost anymore. Weeks earlier, after my art show, I'd found it, or what was left of it, in a box at the donation center. Someone had dropped off a collection of old jewelry. And there it was, broken in two, beads missing, the thread snapped. I'd taken it home, fixed it piece by piece, and hung it by my work table. Not as a reminder of pain, but as proof that some things, once broken, can still shine if you're patient enough to mend them. That night, there was a soft knock on my door. I didn't need to ask who it was. I felt it, like every mother does. I opened the door, and there she stood, Alana. Her eyes red, face pale, clutching her phone like it was a shield she didn't know how to use. She looked smaller than I remembered. Not in size, but in spirit. "Hi, Mom," she whispered.